Welcome to the On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast, your one-stop shop for obesity medicine news with your host, man on the pen, Dave Knapp. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 7th, 2025 edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, Compound, at least for the time being, that pen. And we welcome you to the first episode of 2025, which is certainly going to be marked many weeks this year by topic of accessibility to GLP-1 medications. And we cannot talk about accessibility without talking about the shortages. Of course, the shortages for Zepbound and Manjaro were ended in October, which set off a series of court drama, right? Essentially, the Outsourcing Facilities Association that represents compounding pharmacies sued the FDA over their decision. This past week, there was some breaking news as basically what we saw on December 19th was the FDA doubled down on their decision to leave it off the shortage list, which ultimately would make this case move forward. And so we had some breaking news, even though all eyes were on this Friday for basically all the parties to report back to court. Essentially, Eli Lilly was seeking to interject as a co-defendant with the FDA here. And yesterday, sort of all of a sudden, we were all gobsmacked by a memo that was put out by the judge in this case. Of course, the judge is Mark T. Pittman, who really has a history of going hard after government overreach and even big pharma. Probably the most friendly venue that the OFA could have brought this case. And essentially what happened yesterday was the OFA backed off of their opposition to Lilly joining the case as a defendant. So the judge granted Lilly the ability to come in and defend the case with the FDA. And then what we saw was the judge made a big move in this case. So what the likely outcome of Friday would have been was that the OFA was going to file for a preliminary injunction. Now, what a preliminary injunction would do in this case is, provided the OFA could show the court that there was a likely outcome of this trial that was going to end up in their favor, they could have asked the court to basically pause the FDA's ability to basically enforce anything against compounders for the duration of the trial. Now, this judge in this case actually released a document to the court in an electronic filing that essentially said that not only is the court going to sort of not move forward with a preliminary injunction, I actually want to move this to a summary judgment. And the long and short of it, without getting too technical legally, because I'm no lawyer, but essentially the judge is sort of telegraphing that the trial, in his estimation, based upon what he has seen, is likely to end sooner without the need for discovery and witnesses and all of that. Basically, he wants to move to issue a summary judgment on the legality of what whether the FDA had the ability, whether they essentially acted within the law here, right? And so to kind of sum it up, the judge is basically saying, I want to move this to a summary judgment and basically rule on whether the FDA acted within the purview of the law here. And unless the OFA can present a case that would cause him to make a different decision. And so this all happens Friday. Of course, there's some paperwork basically that the FDA has filed with the court that essentially shows the court, this is how we made our determination to remove tirzepatide from the shortage list. And there are redactions within this. The judge is sort of seeing ahead of this that the OFA is likely to want the FDA to actually show them more than what it sounds like they're willing to show. Of course, this is probably why Eli Lilly wanted to insert themselves, because you can rest assured that the proprietary claims on some of this information is stuff that Lilly doesn't want out there, not even necessarily with the OFA, but with the general public, because this is laced with a lot of legal gray area. And I think there had to have been a lot of gymnastics done to show that there was ample amount of medication to remove this from the shortage list ultimately. But we'll see. So Friday continues to be a big day. If this is indeed moved to a summary judgment, we're likely to get resolution much, much quicker than if this thing would have gone to a full-fledged trial. So we'll have to see what happens on Friday. Of course, we're going to stay on top of it, as we always have here at onthepen.com. And if all of this is intriguing to you and you'd like more information and more background about what's happened along the way, sort of at each step, you got to go over to onthepen.com and check out our GLP-1 news section. We have covered this so closely. In fact, for the last 3 to 4 months, it has dominated the content on this channel. Sometimes I think maybe to the detriment of getting away from some of the things that we've done historically in the past, but I find this to be the banner issue of GLP-1s right now. It is accessibility is a huge issue, whether you're on branded medication and it's hard to find the doses that you're looking for, and you're having to play this roller coaster of, maybe going down a dose or up a dose because you can't find the dose that you need to maintain your treatment, or whether you're on compounds and you're sort of faced with the anxiety of what's going to happen if I lose access to these compounds. So we have tried to stay on top of it as much as we possibly can, as much as a human can, right? So that you can make more competent and confident decisions with your medical providing team about the future of your treatment. Now, something interesting that's sort of been happening in parallel with this, which may indicate how the OFA thinks the court is going to come down on this. Because again, all the court is trying to determine here, they're not trying to determine whether or not tirzepatide is actually in shortage. The court is simply trying to determine whether the FDA acted within the parameters of the law. And it's going to be very difficult for the plaintiffs, in this case, the OFA, to argue that the FDA did not have the jurisdiction to do this. And ultimately, that seems to be what the matter is at hand in the court after reading basically the order that the judge put out yesterday on Monday. But what is sort of happening in parallel with this is within the FDA, one of the mechanisms that they have for compounding medications, obviously they've been able to, 503Bs have been able to compound semaglutide and tirzepatide because they've been in shortage. There's actually a list that the FDA keeps of bulk medications that are able to be compounded by outsourcing facilities, 503Bs, at any time, regardless of a shortage, for essentially the purpose of maintaining a good supply of a necessary medication, right? Which is the whole reason 503B pharmacies exist. Now, recently, the Outsourcing Facilities Association, and this isn't public information, so I'm just reading reports here, but recently the OFA petitioned the FDA to add liraglutide to the list of drugs eligible for compounding in bulk. Again, this is separate from a shortage. It's separate from individualized medications from 503As. This is a special list held by the FDA called the 503B bulk list. And it basically enumerates substances that are exempt from the rule that a drug has to be in shortage in order for them to compound it. And they moved to add liraglutide to this list. Now, very interestingly, we saw this week that Novo Nordisk filed a citizen petition with the FDA. It's sort of a mechanism within the FDA where an interested party can bring a petition to the FDA to basically change the way that it enforces something or put more restrictions on compounding. And so this was a citizen petition from Covington and Burlington LLP, which is the law firm that has been representing Novo Nordisk. It was filed on January 2nd here of 2025. And basically within this petition, Novo Nordisk argues that there is no good reason to have liraglutide added to the list of bulk drug substances that may be used by outsourcing facilities and compounds. And so they are basically saying that the OFA failed to make a good case for the reason that it should be added to this bulk list. And so very, very, very interesting move, because perhaps what you saw here was Novo Nordisk, making a preemptive move to keep this off of the compounded list, but also it may read into the OFA may be looking at, if we lose tirzepatide and ultimately if we lose semaglutide, which is actually also on the chopping block right now with the FDA, I think tirzepatide goes away, so goes semaglutide very quickly, unless there's some different set of information that the FDA sees here. But it's very clear that ultimately what can be arbitrated in the courts is simply the FDA's ability to make a determination about the shortage list, not necessarily the merit of the data that they look at, right? Which is the whole problem with this system. This system is a self-reporting mechanism designed so that there is this like handshake, wink, and a nod between the FDA and the drug companies as to the availability of a medication. Now, objectively, when you look at this objectively, this whole system was not designed for a blockbuster anti-obesity drug. The system was designed to protect taxpayers and patients against drug shortages that were oftentimes historically due to the offshoring of API and the instability in the supply chain of, life-saving medications. Only recently have outsourcing facilities associations or outsourcing facilities, 503Bs and 503As, mass-produced medications that are commercially available and under patent. This is a brand new horizon in drug compounding. And so you see this battle between big pharma and compounders basically taking shape where I think from the pharmaceutical company's perspective, they don't want people profiting off of their hard work and their intellectual property under a system that maybe was not designed for exactly the purpose that it's being used. And I think from the outsourcing facility side, they're looking at this saying, this is exactly why this legislation created 503Bs, was to handle drugs that are in shortage, and we're simply abiding by the law. But because the reporting mechanism and the policy that was written at the FDA really wasn't designed for this, it's got some holes in it, right? And so we have actually put a petition up at PoliciesForThePeople.com, which is a website put up by the incoming administration to take a look at policies. This is definitely one that they should take a look at, because I think as taxpayers and patients both, we're the ones that get left out of the equation. Nobody's talking about patients in this lawsuit. Everybody's talking about protecting their financial interest. And so when we get lost, we ought to have some transparency in the way that our government, the people that work for us, that'd be the FDA, is making the determination that a publicly traded company has provided them that impacts millions of patients. We just ought to have visibility into that. There ought to be accountability with those numbers. And that is what we have petitioned for at PoliciesForThePeople.com. I will link that in the description of this video if you want to go give it an upvote. I really think that this is something that needs some massive reform. So essentially what you see here is liraglutide, the OFA moving to preserve an ability to compound some form of GLP-1 because the shortage stuff's just going to end. I just think as far as GLP-1 goes, I don't know that we ever get another accurate picture of the supply vis-a-vis the FDA's drug shortage tool. So all the report the shortage stuff that we push for, it's been very clear that the FDA does not really consider that information in their analysis of the commercial availability of a drug. Now, I think Eli Lilly would argue and Novo Nordisk would argue, just because you can't find your medication at the pharmacy doesn't constitute a shortage. And I would say that that's fair, especially for a cold storage medication that costs list $1,300 a month. Most pharmacies, especially your mom and pop, are not going to sit on 5 different boxes of each dose of Zepbound and Mounjaro because A, it's not cost effective, and B, what are they supposed to do when they only have a limited amount of refrigeration space? They can't risk, losing that medication. And most mom and pop pharmacies, because of the horrible PBM system that's designed to fleece sick Americans in this country, essentially doesn't reimburse small pharmacies for the total cost of the medication. So not only are they filling these medications and sitting on a bunch of inventory that costs their business a lot of money, they're not even reimbursed for the full amount when you buy it. So they're losing money when you fill it. And so the whole system is pretty jacked up. But I think from the pharmaceutical companies' standpoint, they're over in the corner sort of saying, yeah, these people that are reporting their shortage are just, it's because the pharmacy doesn't have it. All they have to do is call their distributor. Well, if they call the distributor, so this is sort of what another hole in this process, right? Just because they don't have it doesn't mean that it's in shortage, but it also doesn't not mean that it's in shortage either. So in other words, if you go to your pharmacy and they say, yeah, we don't have it and we're not sure when we can get it in, there's nothing to delineate that when you report the shortage, right? The only way to report the shortage is just to say, I couldn't get it, right? And so I think that there's just a lot of holes in this. And clearly the FDA has not taken seriously the shortage reporting from patients. And that's extremely disappointing. I actually ran a poll at onthepin.com this past week on an article that we did about this. And the article probably has about 2,200 hits on it. And of that, about 200 people participated in the poll. The poll asked basically, have you had issues finding your branded Zepbound or Mounjaro in the last 30 days? And a whopping 69% responded in the affirmative. There are about 200 responses. So about 10% of the people who viewed that article participated in the poll, which is about on track with what I would expect. Not everybody that reads articles at On the Pen is actually on a GLP-1. Many are investors, many are providers. So I think that number tracks. And 69% of the people in that anecdotal poll that we ran said that in the last month they have had issues finding their branded medication. So, it just continues to be such a frustrating topic, but we're going to stay on top of it, and we're going to be watching Friday very closely. We'll also be following this thread with liraglutide because, again, if compounds go away for semaglutide and compounds go away for tirzepatide, it's going to leave a lot of people in the dark. Now, this past couple of weeks, there was news that broke that there's actually a second manufacturer of generic liraglutide that was announced. And so now you have 2 companies making generic liraglutide. So even if you go and get a script for liraglutide not compounded, the good news is that if you're going to use it for maintenance, which I think a lot of people using the current, getting to their goal weight with the current medications, liraglutide might be a good option for them to look at for maintenance, right? Total weight loss on the highest dose of liraglutide, I think somewhere around 9%. So way below sort of what you're seeing with the current versions of the medications that are out there, but maybe a great option for maintenance, or somebody who's never been on a GLP-1 who maybe doesn't have quite as much weight to lose, or maybe maintenance for somebody with bariatric surgery. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of use cases. The good news is there's 2 different generic manufacturers of it now, and it looks like the price could land somewhere in the $200 a month range. And that's like going to the pharmacy, your normal pharmacy with a normal prescription, running it through your insurance, all of that. You may be even able to get it a little bit cheaper through your insurance. But if you're paying cash price, the cash pay price probably going to land somewhere in that $200 to $300 range. So that is the good news. The silver lining, if the OFA is unsuccessful at getting liraglutide, it's not a be all end all because there are actually some generics of it. But that leaves a lot of people out in the dark who haven't gotten to their goals with the current medications. We continue to call on Eli Lilly to release all the vials at a price point that makes sense for the average American. Cut out the PBMs. I still continue to think this is an excellent play. Ultimately, to cut out the PBMs, and I'm looking forward to seeing that trickle down through the rest of pharma. Just cut those snakes out of the middle here who are, again, fleecing Americans. So we'll see what happens. We'll follow this. This is definitely going to be a huge topic to follow in 2025. We'll be all over it. I want to continue to thank our sponsor here at On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast, Roe. Roe is an amazing company to work with. They have just been a tremendous sponsor in 2024. We hope that they'll continue to work with On the Pen in 2025. But Roe Body, the Roe Body program, roe.co/OTP, is something to check out if you're looking for access to these medications. Of course, they have the vials through the Roe platform now. So if you want Zep-bound vials, 2.5 or 5, they're now offered by Roe. When you couple GLP-1 treatment with the Roe Body program and lifestyle interventions, patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year on average. So this is a really great program. I hope that you'll check it out. roe.co/OTP. Of course, you're never going to start any medication without knowing the full breadth of the potential side effects that may come with that. All that's going to be available on the Roe website. So go to roe.co/OTP. All the information you need is just a couple clicks away once you get there. Thanks again to Roe for being such a wonderful sponsor in 2024. And we look forward to the future in 2025 with our partners at Roe. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do here at On the Pen. We got some great shows lined up for our Thursday night show on YouTube. We're pushing to get 20,000 subscribers over there. So if you're not subscribed over on YouTube, please just take a moment, go search On the Pen on YouTube and just hit subscribe, hit the bell notification while you're there. The video version of this podcast lives on YouTube. And so we would love to have you check out the video over on YouTube. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being the best part of what we do. Have a great week, and congratulations on starting a new year. Let's reach some goals here, then let's work together to expand accessibility in 2025. Catch you on the next one.